Welcome back to another episode of the Digital Ledger Podcast. I'm DJ, joined by Jeremy, who keeps us honest when it comes to the numbers. This one's about how finance leaders can move beyond traditional reporting and actually use data and AI to drive strategic decisions. It sounds simple, but it's not. So let's start with what's actually happening on the ground. The core challenge finance leaders face right now isn't a lack of data. It's almost the opposite. There's this overwhelming flood of information coming from every direction, every system, every report. And the real problem is most of it doesn't translate into anything actionable. You're drowning in numbers, but you're not necessarily seeing what matters.
That's exactly where the frustration lives, DJ. We've got more dashboards, more reports, more metrics than ever before, but instead of clarity, it just creates noise. Teams are processing so much data that they lose sight of what they're actually trying to answer. The gap isn't access to information, it's turning that information into something strategically useful. And that gap is wider than most leaders realize.
So here's the trap, Jeremy. A lot of finance leaders fall into this belief that more data automatically means better decisions. It's intuitive, right? Collect everything and the answers will just emerge. But what actually happens?
What happens is analysis paralysis. Teams spend weeks aggregating, validating, reconciling, and they never actually extract strategic value. They're stuck in the weeds. The assumption that volume equals insight is one of the most expensive mistakes finance can make because it burns time and resources on work that doesn't move the business forward.
And that's the distraction. Finance teams are already stretched thin. So when they're spending all their capacity just managing this flood of data, the truly strategic work gets pushed aside. The insights that could actually give the business a competitive edge or uncover new opportunities, they never surface. It's all rear-view mirror, no windshield. Before we continue with the episode, we want to be transparent with our audience, and that is that AI helps support research and shape parts of this episode. But all fact-checking, analysis, and final decisions come from us as humans. We're blending the best of both worlds. Alright, so moving right along, let's talk about the reframe. Because if the trap is just accumulating more data, the leadership move is shifting from reporting what happened to anticipating what's next. How does finance actually make that shift?
It starts with the question, DJ, and I mean a real business question, not a data question. What decision are you trying to make? What problem are you solving? Because if you start by just pulling reports and hoping for insight, you're already off track. You need to be ruthlessly clear about what you're trying to answer. That clarity drives everything else.
So the why comes first, and once you have that clear question, the next step is sourcing the right data, not just any data. How do you guide leaders to focus on what actually matters and not get lost in noise?
It's about relevance and reliability, DJ. You validate the source, you check the timeliness, and you ask, does this actually help me answer my question? Once you've got solid data, the analysis moves beyond summaries. You're looking for patterns, correlations, outliers, things that signal a shift. And here's a practical step for listeners. Take a recent project your team worked on and ask yourself, did we start with a clear business question? Did we only pull data that was directly relevant? If the answer is no, that's where the waste is.
And the final step is turning that analysis into action. It's not enough to say, here's what the data shows. Finance has to translate insight into clear, actionable recommendations. That's where the value actually lands, when you're guiding executive decisions and influencing strategy. That's the difference between being a scorekeeper and being a strategic driver. Alright, so we've talked frameworks and mindset. Now let's talk technology side, because when we say leverage data, AI and automation are usually part of that conversation. What does that actually look like in practice for finance teams?
It's about taking the repetitive work off the table, reconciliation, routine reporting, formulaic forecasting. Automation and AI handle those tasks with more speed and accuracy than humans ever could. And this isn't about replacing people, it's about freeing them up to do what humans do best: interpret, question, and strategize.
Exactly. When your team isn't spending hours compiling spreadsheets or hunting down discrepancies, they can focus on the deeper questions. They can interpret the why behind the numbers and actually engage as strategic partners. The role shifts from data processor to analyst, And that's a fundamentally different value proposition.
And here's where AI really delivers, DJ. It can flag anomalies and spot trends faster than any human. But then the finance team steps in to investigate, interpret, and translate those insights into business recommendations. So, for leaders listening, take a look at your team's workload this week. Identify one high volume, low value task. That's your starting point for automation.
Now, we've talked a lot about the tech, the tools, the automation, but here's the reality. None of that matters without the human side. The real core of digital transformation in finance is building data literacy across the team and fostering a culture where people are curious, not just about the numbers, but about what those numbers mean for the business.
Absolutely, DJ. Having the tools is one thing. Having people who can actually use them effectively is something else entirely. Data literacy isn't just pulling a report. It's asking the right questions, understanding the limits of the data, and translating complex analysis into clear business insights for non-finance stakeholders. That's a skill set finance leaders need to be actively building right now because the technology only amplifies what the humans can do with it.
So the real question is, how do you actually build that culture? It's easy to say, be curious, but harder to embed. I think finance leaders need to create real opportunities for their teams to engage with data in new ways. Maybe that's assigning stretch projects that go beyond routine reporting. Maybe it's internal workshops where team members present how they use data to solve a real business problem. Make it tangible, not theoretical.
And it's about creating space for people to explore and even make mistakes in a safe environment. When teams feel comfortable challenging assumptions and digging into the why, they naturally start using those technological tools we talked about in more innovative ways. That's when finance truly becomes a strategic partner instead of just the scorekeeper.
So, as we bring this to a close, Jeremy, what's the ultimate challenge we want to leave finance leaders with today?
I think it's about stepping up and driving the data strategy, not just participating in it. Finance leaders need to move from being consumers of data to being the architects of how data generates value across the organization. That means actively shaping initiatives, asking the tough questions about ROI, and making sure every investment in AI or analytics translates into measurable business impact.
It's about securing that seat at the strategic table by driving the conversation, not just showing up for it. Every data initiative, every potential AI investment, you ask, how does this create tangible business value? How do we measure it? How does it shape our next phase of growth? That's the proactive stance finance needs to take right now.
And it requires a real mindset shift. Being proactive, asking those tough questions up front, and making sure data strategy isn't just an IT or operations initiative, it's fundamentally a finance initiative, because finance is the ultimate arbiter of value. If finance isn't leading here, who has that holistic view?
That's the opportunity. Finance isn't just managing historical numbers anymore. It's making sure those numbers tell the most valuable story possible, and then helping the business write the next chapter with those insights. That's the real differentiator. All right, I think we've hit the key points here. Moving finance from reactive reporting to strategic driver. That's the real shift we're talking about.
Really solid conversation, DJ. I'm glad we walked through how to actually make data work for leadership, not just reporting.
All right, I think that's a good place to leave this. It's been a really good discussion. And to those of you listening, thank you for staying with us and spending your time here. We don't take that lightly. Until next time.